Okay.
So hi everybody, welcome to another session of Navigating a Crisis, Conversations of Change. And today I have Brendan.Fitzhenry here with me. But before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which both Brendan and I are on, and also where you might be viewing this. Pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I guess just a little bit of context, the idea of behind these conversations is just to give people a sense of what's happening in the AOD sector, in related sectors, what the human experience is behind what is actually occurring in it for a collective, but what is the human experience, the individual experience underneath that, and to be able to share that and to support each other and learn from each other. So I will just hand it over to Brendan now. He can introduce himself. He's far better at it than I am, and then we'll start it.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Naomi. So my name's Brendan.Fitzhenry. I work for the Salvation Army. I am a manager of homelessness across Western Victoria. So that's all Western metro areas and all Western and Southwestern regions through to the South Australian border. So quite a large geographical region, and then also that encompasses quite a lot of the homelessness service system as well in one particular angle or another, in terms of the types.
So you lucked out with that. You lucked out with that division.
Yeah. I'm part of a raft of 3 regional managers that cover the state, and then there's a state manager that sits on top of us, figuratively rather than literally. But yes, quite a busy space.
Yeah, cool, great, thank you. So you'll bring probably a lot of insight. I know you've had a background in AOD as well, so you bring the homelessness lens currently, but with an understanding of the AOD context, which is super helpful. But the first question is, so what are you currently doing for yourself, your staff, the people that you serve, and I guess the organisation and the region more generally, to manage the current situation in a way that is safe, that is humane and allows for a sense of dignity? So I think in particularly in the homelessness space, a lot of what's happening perhaps might be taking away a sense of agency for people as well in some respects. So, how are we able to manage all that in a way that people still maintain that sense of self and sense of dignity?
Yes, I suppose most generally I'd say that with very mixed results, actually. But we're doing our best, and part of the reason for that is that everything is very fast moving at the moment too. A lot of modifications to the system, a lot of modifications to the way we're pursuing work, a lot of immediate change in the daily experience of the people that we provide services to. Already sort of quite stressed and marginalised folk, and so we're seeing a lot of impact from those people when we're encountering them. So I suppose in terms of for myself, I would say, what am I currently doing for myself? Well, I'm doing my job. Bit modified. I'm occasionally out at services at the moment, but mostly working from home, like a lot of people. That adds a layer to the daily work that's a little blurry, sometimes confusing, sometimes a bit frustrating, because everyone's always at a remove all of the time. We're a bit limited by the capacity to engage in free time conversations, in being able to follow your nose when you're encountering problems and issues, and have that kind of more mobile response. So those are all limitations, but still we're able to achieve a lot. We're in the business of talking and negotiating with other people, and we can do that largely through these other means. In terms of staff and the people we serve, well, the service landscape has suddenly shifted enormously. I'll take an entry points as a homelessness entry points as a great example. The entry points have moved to largely telephone service, where beforehand we would get large volumes of people walking in through doors to receive a service and to make an appointment, often in distress, sometimes in danger. With all of that going on, now these doors are closed with a big fat sign on the front that says, if you need us, ring this number. That being, we've got line of sight, so when we have emergency presentations during the day, we can admit people, which is very maintained, because there are circumstances where people can't connect or won't connect outside of the face-to-face. Have to accept that as a part of the working life and take appropriate precautions in all of that. So in terms of our staff, I suppose what the Salvation Army did pretty early in the piece was to assess which staff were sufficiently matching up with the vulnerabilities that indicate that the effects of virus transmission would be particularly sort of harsh or dangerous on folks, and move people out of the front line. Well, when I say the front line, out of the physical environment of transmission to the home environment. They're still on the front line, they're manning phones and they're responding to clients and they're doing and organising a lot of stuff. So there's a lot going on. And then in the entry points, we've got essentially skeleton staff and then some other programs, some of the other support programs in there. But less people, more distance, more cleaning, more hygiene. And fewer clients face-to-face. Then just in terms of those, they are the people we serve, the people that come into our programs. I suppose for homelessness, there's a huge preventative piece, which is principally around trying to stop people falling into homelessness, being able to engage a bit of preventative brokerage to assist people not to have their tenancies fall over, to meet and negotiate bills around rent, etc. And of course, what we've had is a massive disruption to what was in any case insecure work or various kinds of work that's thrown people out of work and into immediate crisis. So very, very busy in that space. Busy working, negotiating with landlords, real estate agents, trying to meet the needs of various people, or at least come up with an interim solution while we figure out what else is going on. About 3% or so of the people that receive a homelessness assistance every year are people that are classed as rough or street sleepers. And their world has changed exponentially as well. Many fewer people on the street. Many of the frontline services closed because of the congregation of people around those, which makes them an unacceptable risk at the moment. These people are far more socially isolated than they ever have been. So a lot of the underlying sort of social conditions that come along with that, feelings of helplessness, frustration, rage, sometimes all of those things, are heightened and to the fore a bit too. So generally we can see distressed, scared, with underlying health. So they realise absolutely that transmission to them is going to be very poor. And so they're navigating all of those things, but unable to receive the kind of daily support services that they would have in the past. So most community centres are closed now, or they're just providing a remote and a human contact light version of what they used to do. And well, we need to do that because they're often staffed by volunteers. Our volunteer workforce is rather ancient, and so off the front line. So we've been unable to sustain most of those things. So I think for the people we serve, one massive economic dislocation, and the other one is social isolation. And for people that are on the fringes, outside, feeling uncertain, this is a terrible thing. So we are, I suppose, trying to support, manage, contain positively and pragmatically work with people to address the reasons why they're coming to us. In the meantime, naturally, there are safety concerns that we have to consider. There's a prioritising of essential and non-essential or less essential services as well. So there's some redeployment of the workforce inside homelessness at the moment to make sure, particularly that staffed residential sites and sites like entry points continue. They must continue, but also that we provide the kind of support that supports folks as we move them into various kinds of accommodation. So state government released extra brokerage funding to do that. Our Rough Sleepers initiative has been working very strongly with case management services, to put rough and street sleepers into accommodation, and to connect them with case management to try and keep them in accommodation, and also to work with the facilities to try and keep them in accommodation too. That's a mixed bag. For all that, some folks are delighted with having somewhere to stay. The reality and isolation of it, again, is a burden sometimes that it's impossible to navigate your way through. So we've had people come and go, I think it's fair to say. But we are deploying more and more case management into trying to support people to stay put until we've got a reasonable handle on how to manage the distancing and other safety aspects of the pandemic. That's pretty much where we're at on all of that.
So much. There's so many questions I want to ask. I mean, as we were talking about before, this idea that the human experience is really coming to the fore, that, it's not just about getting somebody a home. It's not just a single issue. There's a range of other things that need to go around, or a range of other supports that people require to sustain that, I think, long term. And so the idea of redeploying to case management as opposed to those, I guess, the other services that people were undertaking potentially is something that would continue post this as well, given that that's a change for people. Putting someone in a house is great, but it's how you keep them there.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. So it's never just about housing. It's about housing plus support. So for some folks, it will just be about housing. But actually, very significantly, it's much more than that. In a sense, there is a massive short-term buy-up of room to put people in. Short-term. So it doesn't address any of that particularly. The support we're putting into place now is about keeping them in this short-term option. The broader piece of work is, well, what then? I'd love to think that in terms of economic stimulus to get us all going again, a very significant investment in social housing might take place. And that would be very meaningful. It would give a further destination for folks with support, to have that opportunity, which I think would be really, really good.
Yeah. And this idea that people are being seen, that people's struggles are being seen and they're being responded to. And even if the impetus for that response is something that we couldn't have imagined, but it doesn't mean that we're not able to continue that post this. Because how could you rescind it? How could you take it back after, demonstrating what's possible? I think that's an exciting part. What's happening?
Yeah. Although I think, Naomi, in the sense that how could you rescind it is essentially a moral question.
Yeah,
Not
it
a
is.
question. And I think you bump into some real issues, you know. But I agree with you entirely. I think one of the great learnings of this time is that we're all being very creative about modifying our response to try and meet, support people where they are or where they need to be in terms of safety and really it's public safety response. This one, we're trying to keep people safe. But more broadly, there are those underlying matters about what then, etc. And we have to continue to consider those. I think that this has given us an opportunity to reimagine what kinds of support we actually want to offer, as opposed to what we're always left with in state government funded contracts, which is at some level a projection of what demand is made, and funding is then delivered to an agency to respond to that projection. In AOD, in homelessness, it's the same. The experience is parallel. The actual presentation is generally quite different to the projected service demand, locked in by your funding. And so service types, treatment types, brokerage and conditions of brokerage application, they're all quite tightly bound, and they can come in certain ways under certain conditions. I think what we've been advocating for some time is a broad loosening of that, to say, give us clinical carriage of the situation with flexible engagement. Attached to that flexible brokerage, so that we can make sense of how to apply that. Attached to that, a accountability around outcomes, and let those elements determine how we respond to the folks that need our services. That would be great. In a sense, we're trying to carve that out at the moment on the fly, but it's a lovely little taste of what possible we could do in the future. Yeah.
And that's kind of a nice segue into the next question: is how can people support you? How can people, is it in terms of advocacy, reducing stigma, changing language? Is it around, I mean, you spoke about volunteers before, in terms of, what are things that people can do to support, I guess, that vision that you've just created, but also practically to support what's happening on the ground now?
So I would say cross-sector communication, cross-sector working together. It's always a great plan. I'm always a fan of that. Love to see more, not less. Yeah. So, what I like at the moment, one of the few things I think that put us in a good position, or will put us in an interesting position in AOD post-recommission, was the strong emphasis on partnerships. That created some problems as well. The reality was that post-recommissioning, I knew far many staff from other agencies, far more people in the department that I could have frank conversations with than I did before. So all of the, what you might call the sins of the new service sector, there were some upsides to that as well. Homelessness is not developed in quite the partnership ways that AOD was pushed into. And there's lots of room there. There are lots of great partnerships in homelessness. Don't get me wrong. And there are some really interesting venues, the LASNs, the local area service networks, good venues for coordination amongst homelessness groups. But local area coordination more broadly, I think, is really the way to go. So then it's about just getting on to each other and saying, hey, let's meet, let's discuss synergies and and networking and how to wrap ourselves around what's going on in our neighbourhoods. I think it's a really good immediate plan. And outside of that, I think it would be great to capture the learnings of the modified practices we're putting into place over this pandemic period and seeing what we can then take through to the funder and the state government. And say, we'd like to see these continue. So a group advocacy on that level, I think, would be really great. And then there's, sorry. And then there's lots of community resources that we rely on that are not funded by anyone except for local groups getting together in one way or another. And so there's always a space for those areas, I'd say. In homelessness, I've seen the most magnificent groups of local concerned groups of people getting together to sustain community centres, cobbled together on almost no money. It's quite terrifying, really. But those are spaces where volunteers find quite a lot of meaningful activity, and donation is always welcomed. I think it's just about how can we come off the back of this into a more united community. I think something lovely to see coming from it.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, is another, we've planned this really well, clearly. It's another nice segue into the final question, which you potentially answered. But, you know, what is your positive reframe for how this crisis could create opportunities for improving, you know, individual experiences, but also the collective condition?
That might be a nice segue for you, but it's a tricky question. Look, I see lots of that, you know, the germination of lots of really positive things at this time as well. That it demonstrates that with the right levers, people can jump sideways with great alacrity and at great speed. It's good to see, because we've also seen examples where people are so hidebound, or communities or groups or political elites sort of are so hidebound they can't change course, and there are costs to pay on that. But for me, it's about there's an explosion of creativity, drama and fear that really are always there if you look for it as well, also around sadness and loss. And sometimes they're the things to pay attention to and carry forward as well. So for me, there's a lot of creativity around how we are trying to go out and find and change the circumstances around people. People that are not doing well in the current circumstance, and I think that holding to those as great examples of what can be brought to bear in any situation is a really good idea. So for me, these are extraordinary times. It is rather unusual for all of us, but it's unlocked an ability to move and shape the way we do our work and the way we consider each other in a way that can be sustainable and can be encouraged to come forward. I'm not saying that it can be written explicitly into funding and contracts, but it can be there in spirit.
But, you know, it could be written into funding contracts. It's always possible.
Yeah.
But once you've started, you're right, once you've started thinking a different way, or started seeing, you know, the same old familiar territory with really fresh eyes, because we've had to, right? We've been forced into positions that we would never have chosen. So we've, you know, in order to be able to continue providing service and service delivery, we've had to think differently and had to view things differently, identify what are actual priorities. And I think in that we've seen the human in everything that we do, whether it's, you know, the people that we serve, or whether it's our staff, or whether it's ourselves in terms of our own needs. We've seen the human, And I think once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. So yeah, hopefully it does remain there in spirit, and it would be even better if it would remain there in funding as well.
I would agree. But it does show that in challenge, through challenges, have the capacity to reimagine what's going on. And that's a great thing. I'm not saying that therefore the answer is to challenge everybody all of the time.
I don't know, my boss might agree with that.
Yeah. But when it comes, it is really to hold to the what is it about this that's unlocking our potential to address this in new and different ways and to carry forward. And I think that really at the heart of that as well is that how do we collectively as humans in organizations but also in social community refer to each other and give that kind of dignity and voice to each other as well. So it's not a dictatorship of I know what to do here. It's wow, how are we going to do this?
Yes. Yeah.
And really unlock our collective potential as well. So I think that's an incredibly important element.
Oh my God, that is like the most brilliant point to just leave this on, because it was so eloquent. I love it. It is.
That's so good. That's enough now, Brendan. Yeah.
No, I legitimately mean that. Like this idea of, moving forward together. All right. I mean, people have been saying that a lot in terms of we're all in this together. We're all in this together experience. But what does that mean when it's not just rhetoric? What does that mean when it's taken into action? And
so that's right. And but the danger of not finishing right there. What does it mean? Because it's said generally by people in positions of power who have the privilege to say it. And what we know is that people's on the margin, individually and collectively, don't feel that we're all in this together.
Correct.
It still can feel a bit out on the, in fact, that's magnified. So there is something about that, which is, there's a great unanswered challenge in this, which is how to get that next bit done, how to give dignity to those folks, but inclusion to those folks as well.
And creating the space for needs and voices and people to be heard and included. Absolutely.
Exactly. And it's not lost on me that I'm saying that as a white middle-aged.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that you can acknowledge it and the fact that you can see your part in that is excellent. Like that's a step forward in my mind. I think I might leave it there.
Yeah, tricky territory to finish.
But it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing. And
my pleasure.
After we've finished this, I'll get some detail off you just to pop on the YouTube link so people can connect, if not with you directly, then at least with the salvos, if there's anything they want to contribute. But it's been wonderful to hear your perspective and what you're doing in the space and the really beautiful, humanistic approach you're taking. So thank you so much for sharing and for your time, and best of luck. We'll be moving forward with you on this, yeah?
Thanks very much, Naomi. I do appreciate the work that you do and you bring to VADA as well. And thanks to VADA, I think this is a good idea.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan.
Lovely.
Ciao.
See ya.